السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome back to another episode of Quran in English. My name is Ahmed and I'm happy to take you through the last 8 verses, 8 ayat of Surah Ar-Ra'd, chapter Ar-Ra'd, which means, of course, means thunder. Before I get into the last verses, I must always explain that I'm not a Quranic scholar, nor am I an Arabic linguist. I've not studied the Arabic language, nor have I studied the Quran. In fact, this is my first read through of the Quran for a lot of it, but some of it I've read before. And I'm merely sharing my education journey with you so that you might learn something as well, or that if you have a different perspective on something that I've said, please feel free to drop it in the comments. And I will happily learn from you as well. But the purpose of this channel is education. Cool. Let's drive straight in. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. And off we go.
مثل الجنة التي وعد المتقون تجري من تحتها الأنهار أكلها دائم وظلها تلك عقبى الذين اتقوا وعقبى الكافرين النار.
So we kick things off with heaven. In the previous section, there was a lot of conversation to talk about the believers and the ones that do right and what they have to do. So this is where we're talking about their abode, what happens after they die and they've been judged and they're judged to go to heaven. Here it says the example of paradise, that which is promised to the righteous. Is it an example then? Here they talk about it as the description, but mathal is example. Example is correct. And we've seen this in the previous verses in this chapter as well. It says the example it gives are like the blind. The example it gives is of, for instance, the same word that was for foam versus the same word that produces metal that stays. The word for foam, I forgot the word for it. And God was making an example out of those two. So why is it saying... But also, مثل الجنة التي وعد المتقون, it could mean that what's coming next is an example of it. But again, why is it an example? Anyway, it describes heaven to say, it flows from underneath it rivers, which always used to confuse me. I'm like, why does it flow from underneath it rivers? But then if you kind of make the association that water is life and vegetation that has water next to it is an ever-flowing garden that will survive. So the kind of an infinite abundance of life is what it's saying. And then it says it's food. I guess it's fruits. Its food is everlasting, and its shade, which is kind of an interesting concept. We need shade here on Earth to protect us from the sun because the sun can be too warm. Is the sun too warm? But also, I think there was another explanation saying that there's always sun in heaven. I think it's in the next couple of verses. I read the verses, then I took a break. So we'll take a look at that concept in a bit. And it says this is the end, the final destination, the outcome for those that are mindful. Ittaqu is if you're mindful of something. Oh.
اتقوا.
الذين اتقوا. Yeah. So be mindful. I don't know why it's saying righteous. I can understand why it means righteous because you're mindful of God. You are a righteous person. But it's more like you watched out for something, right? Or maybe I misunderstood it. Anyway, and then it says the opposite end is the end of the disbelievers, the destination of the disbelievers is fire, simply put. So it's very interesting the word mathalul jannati. Why would it use mathal? And then it talks about the believers.
والذين آتيناهم الكتاب يفرحون بما أنزل إليك ومن الأحزاب من ينكر بعضه قل إنما أمرت أن أعبد الله ولا أشرك به إليه أدعو وإليه مآب.
Okay, this is interesting because I just now thought of something completely different than what I thought of it the first time. But and those who we have given them the book rejoice at what has been revealed to you. Now here it says, "O prophet." And let me continue to kind of clarify. But from among the groups are those who deny parts of it. Which it would kind of make sense if we're talking about the prophet in the sense that the people of the book would rejoice. But the people of the book here describes the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims. And I don't feel like the Jews and the Christians rejoiced with the revelation of the Quran and what was brought down to Muhammad. I do think that from groups of them, they denied parts of it. However, and again, the prophet is not mentioned. There's no mention of prophet. It just says of what we have revealed to you. Now, the reason why I said, when I first thought of it, I read this as if it was the prophet, and it made sense to me. But on second glance, like I said, I believe that there might be a messenger after the Prophet Muhammad, and this might be referring to him. And so those who are given the book would include the Muslims, the Christians, and so this, because again, the Quran is timeless, right? The Quran talks about future moments and includes the people that believe in it within its scripture, right? Because the for me is the rejoicing of what has been revealed to you is not how I imagined the Christians and the Jews did as what was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad. I don't feel like they rejoiced, right? I don't feel like they went, oh, this is a continuation of what we believe in. I think the fact that they remain Jews and Christians means that they did not celebrate what was brought to the Prophet Muhammad. And that's why I kind of thought of something different than what I initially thought, because they didn't rejoice. But it's possible that they will rejoice at a future messenger, because it's of what has been revealed to you, which again, what has been revealed to you can indicate that this is talking about the Quran that was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, but it could be to the message that comes to the future messenger, right? And then from the groups are people who deny parts of it, which is fine. Either way, the message that the Quran is saying is very clear, whether it's talking to the Prophet or it's talking to a future messenger. It says, "Say, only I have been commanded that I worship God, and I do not associate any partners with him. And to him I call, and to him my return." Which, if we think of this in the context of the Prophet Muhammad, this makes a lot of sense, and it's a very beautiful statement for the Prophet Muhammad to say, right? It applies to the Prophet Muhammad 100%. That here it's saying there are parts of the book, there are parts of the groups that deny parts of what has been revealed to the Prophet Muhammad. And obviously the parts that have been revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, such as Jesus is a prophet and a messenger, but not the Son of God, and God never had any children. It could talk about how the Christians rejoiced with some of what the Muslims were saying, but then denied parts of it. And then here the command to the Prophet Muhammad is also very clear and very powerful. All he has to say is that only I am commanded that I worship God and I do not associate partners with him. Because that's exactly what Jesus said. Right? And that's kind of the beauty in the response. It's not like argue with them about the semantics. Was Jesus God? Wasn't Jesus God? You just say it. And by saying this, you're saying that I do not associate partners with him. You're also saying that, Jesus was not God. So the Prophet Muhammad saying this would identify him as a messenger, compare him to Jesus, because they both said the same thing, and in the same sense deny when people say pray to Jesus, because that is associating partners with God. which is not what Jesus said. Jesus said there's only one God, pray to only God. So, and then here it's to him I call, and to him is my return. Very clear.
وكذلك أنزلناه حكما عربيا ولئن اتبعت أهواءهم بعدما جاءك من العلم ما لك من الله من ولي ولا واق.
Okay, so here it kind of narrows down on the Prophet Muhammad, because it says, and thus we have revealed to you the Hukman Arabiyan, the judgment of authority, to be in Arabic. It could also mean the wisdom that is Arabic. It's more likely to the judgment of authority, to be honest. I think that makes more sense. Hukman Arabiyan. So it's saying, and thus we have revealed to you as the judgment of in Arabic, which if you kind of continue it from the previous verse, with what has been revealed to you, you can assume that because it's talking about the judgment that is in Arabic, that this is a continuation of the previous verse, which would kind of make sense. However, we've seen many times, and specifically in this chapter, it starts talking about something and then it says something else. And then it talks about something else, and then it talks about something else. And we've seen this also, this format in the end of a lot of the chapters of the Quran, the chapters that we have read in the past, and thus we have revealed it to you, and thus we have revealed it to you. And it's kind of like it's starting to summarize what's the point of this specific chapter. So here it says, and thus we have revealed to you that with the judgment of authority in Arabic, and if and here is a warning, and if you follow their desires after it came to you from knowledge, then you have there is nothing for you against God from any protector and no defender. And this is kind of the scary part, because like to be human is to be limited in our understanding. We don't understand everything, right? And our brains don't work in a way that we understand everything all the time. And sometimes we can learn a lesson in the past and then forget it, and then have to learn the lesson again, and then forget it, and then have to learn the lesson again. You know what I mean? So it's a bit hard to have this feeling, this it's not a threat, but it's a warning. And if you were to follow their desires after it came to you of knowledge, then against God you have no protector and no defender. It's kind of a threat, but it's not a threat. It's a warning, right? It's if you follow their desires and you don't follow what has been revealed, then you are in trouble. And this seems to be directed specifically at the Prophet Muhammad, to be honest, because it was talking about, and thus we have revealed the judgment of authority in Arabic. Can this apply to future circumstances? I think it can apply. It can apply, but I don't think it applies to every human. But I do think it applies to the specific ones tasked with God's message. Is that indeed, if you follow their desires from after it came to you from knowledge, then you won't have a protector or a defender from God.
ولقد أرسلنا رسلا من قبلك وجعلنا لهم أزواجا وذرية وما كان لرسول أن يأتي بآية إلا بإذن الله لكل أجل كتاب.
This contains a few interesting things as well. It says, and certainly we have sent messengers from before you, and we have made for them wives and offspring, and bless them with wives and offspring. And it was not for any messenger that he comes with a sign except by the leave of God. Now, here it says sign, but bi'ayatin, like for instance, this verse is called an ayah, which a lot of the times the Quran uses ayah for multiple words. One is a verse from the Quran, 2 is a sign, 3 is a miracle or a proof that God exists. And here it's saying, and it was not for any messenger to come with a sign or with let's say, a statement, an education, advice, something for us to learn from, because like all the messengers kind of came with a message and like, don't do this, don't cheat, don't lie, don't kill the camel, and those are also not exactly verses in the same sense as the Quran, but they are messages, you know. And here it's saying that no messenger has shared a message without, except by the leave of God. I was about to say something that I learned from the Bible yesterday, which is why I really shouldn't cross learn at the same time, because I'm like, oh, this came from the Quran. Wait, no, it's not. It came from the Bible. It's a bit hard to study both, but I'm studying the Bible as well. A lot less than I'm studying the Quran, and a lot less formally. But anyway. Then it says 3 words. لِكُلِّ أَجَلٍ كِتَابٍ. For every matter, I think matter is more accurate than a time, has a set time. Or for every time is something written. For every... I wonder what happens if we... Yeah, let's just use the translate, because I want to see what the basic translation... Allah has a term for everything. That's pretty cool. For every term is a decree. Yeah. So it's kind of like kitabun, but this kind of... I also find it very interesting, because it says 3 things. Messengers before you, blessed with wives and offspring. Not for any messenger to bring any sign without God's permission, or any verse without God's permission, or any guidance without God's permission. And that for every time, something written. It's interesting the way that it's phrased. لِكُلِّ أَجَلٍ كِتَابٌ. For every time, something written. Rather than for everything there is a time and place. It's for every time there's something written, which is kind of interesting.
يمحو الله ما يشاء ويثبت وعنده أم الكتاب.
Now this is something that kind of confused me. Ooh, are we doing that? Are we? Okay. God erases what he wills and confirms. So he erases and he confirms what he will. And with him is the mother of the book. The master record, I think it makes more sense. But God erases what he wills and confirms what he wills. It makes it feel like let's call it the book of destiny. The book of the events of life. The book of how everything is happening. It feels like it's not fixed. It feels like it's fluid and dynamic. I mean, like, the concept is God knows everything, right? And knows who's going to believe and who's not going to believe. So he knows what's going to be written. But then here it talks about God erasing what he wills and confirming what he wills. It's giving me the visual of like the never-ending story of like as he's reading the book is being written, but it's one step further. It's as God is reading the book, he can choose what he wants to erase and what he wants to include. I think. Interesting. And for him is the mother of the book. Which is kind of there's a book called Children of the Valley, which I highly recommend for anyone who follows the stories of Muhammad, Jesus, Moses, Adam, because it's an allegory. It's all these stories and how Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, but in the Garden of Eden they were in the house of the rich man and the city, and then their sin was that they went to see the book that contains, that God told them, or that the God equivalent told them in the book, told them, don't look at this book, it has the master records. And then the devil kind of convinced them to go to the master records and read the book. And essentially it's an allegory for them biting from the fruit of knowledge and gaining somewhat knowledge, but it's not full knowledge, but they gain some form of it. So it's kind of interesting that this visual of the mother of the book exists, because there's the book that we have, and then there's the mother of the book with God, and they feel like they're two different things. The book that we have is the Quran, the Injil, the Torah, and I always forget about the Zabur, what came down to David, the Zabur. But this is a different book, and for him is the mother of the book. And I feel like this is tied into what is being said before. He can erase and he can confirm what he wills in the mother of the book. So God has full flexibility and power to do whatever he wants. But it almost feels like it's not constant. Like maybe everything isn't predetermined. Like what we know about God and his perspective is that he will always have the final say, right? And here it's saying God can erase whatever he wills and confirm whatever he wills. So God can shape this world in any way, shape, or form that he wishes. But it also feels more fluid and dynamic, which is a bit interesting. Yeah, it's interesting.
وَإِمَّا نُرِيَنَّكَ بَعْضَ الَّذِي نَعِدُهُمْ أَوْ نَتَوَفَّيَنَّكَ فَإِنَّمَا عَلَيْكَ الْبَلَاغُ وَعَلَيْنَا الْحِسَابُ.
This is a scary statement. It says, and whether we show you part of what we promised them, or we cause you to die, or like claim your soul. So I don't understand how this is an or statement. Either we show you what we promised them, or we cause you to die. And I feel like the second half of this kind of explains what the perspective is. Whether we show you or whether we cause you to die before we show you, it says, only upon you is the conveying, to deliver the message, to convey the message, and upon us is the reckoning. So in this way, it kind of says that you as a messenger don't have to worry about whether or not you will see the deliverance or if you will die. All you have to do is deliver your message. And upon us is the reckoning.
أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا أَنَّا نَأْتِي الْأَرْضَ نَنْقُصُهَا مِنْ أَطْرَافِهَا وَاللَّهُ يَحْكُمُ لَا مُعَقِّبَ لِحُكْمِهِ وَهُوَ سَرِيعُ الْحِسَابِ.
Now here is an interesting phrase. Because it says, do they not see that we come to the earth and we reduce it from its borders? So the first question that I had is the earth being reduced in terms of landmass? And the idea that I got is that climate change, people have been saying that the sea levels are rising, sea levels are rising, sea levels are rising. And that I would imagine that we were losing land. However, I went to Google and I said, is the earth losing landmass? And it said, no, the earth is not losing significant landmass. In fact, overall land area has increased since 1985. I also want to see what ChatGPT says. Just out of curiosity, because I just want to validate from multiple sources. It's saying, but I have to, what? Yes, in some ways, Earth is losing landmass, although it's complex and dynamic process with gains and losses. So Google is saying that we're not losing landmass, and ChatGPT is saying we are. Yeah, the overall trend is towards a net land loss, according to ChatGPT, but Google is saying the opposite, and it's the Google AI. And then the other thing that I thought about is, because the Quran is for all times, maybe do they not see that we have come to the land to reduce it from its borders? Maybe it hasn't happened just yet. And maybe it will happen a bit more significantly. Because again, this could be a moment in the future. It might not be a moment right now. And then it continues saying, and God, Wallahu yahkum, and God judges. Oh, and when God judges, there is no adjuster for his judgment, and he is swift in reckoning. I don't know what that means, but like maybe an idea that comes to mind is that once we start losing landmass at a high rate, that God's judgment is coming swift. Maybe that's the thing. But I, for instance, did not see that we're gradually reducing land from the borders. So for me, and according to ChatGPT, it is happening. According to Google and Google's AI, it's not happening. What is this? AI responses. What is this AI response? Anyway, it was interesting food for thought. And maybe that's one of the signs of Judgment Day. But who knows? We'll see.
وقد مكر الذين من قبلهم فلله المكر جميعا يعلم ما تكسب كل نفس وسيعلم الكفار لمن عقبى الدار.
And even though we've talked about, erasing and writing in the master book and God changing things, in the end of the day, the message is still the same. And here it says, and certainly plotted those who were from before them, but for God is the plot of all, which is kind of an interesting way of expressing it, because it's very much saying that their plots are within God's plots. He's got the superset of plots. He's got, this is the overall plan, and then they've got a bunch of plans where they're trying to, outdo God, outdo each other, but they're all falling within the plan of God. And then essentially, in the end of the day, God has the whole perspective, and it always resides with him. He knows what every soul earns, and the disbelievers will learn for whom is the final outcome, the final destination, the final destination. Aqbad dar. Home is correct. The final home, where every person will go for their final home.
ويقول الذين كفروا لست مرسلا قل كفى بالله شهيدا بيني وبينكم ومن عنده علم الكتاب.
Interesting. For the final verse for today, in the final verse of chapter Ra'd, it says, and those that disbelieve say, you are not a messenger. And all you have to say in response is, say, God is sufficient as a witness between me and between you, and whoever has the knowledge of the book. Which is very, very interesting perspective. And very beautiful. Because I don't know. For me, like it's magical. That it's not. I used to always get confused when it says God is a sufficient witness. Like if they don't believe in God, then how are they going to accept this as a response? But I think this is not giving them an answer in a way. This is telling them that God is a sufficient witness. And you know what? Like I don't need you to believe me. God believes me, and my problems with God, I think, is kind of the main focus. But what I like the most is, and whoever has the knowledge of the book is also someone what is sufficient for me. So it's not just what's God, it's also those who believe in the scripture that was said before. And that, gives me a feeling of hope. Anyway, that was the episode for today. 8 verses, but it was quite nice. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. And I'll catch you guys tomorrow for a discussion where Safa and I discuss the chapter. I honestly don't know how we're going to discuss it because it's such an interesting chapter, but we're going to give it a go and see how we go from there. Thanks for watching. Oh yeah, as usual, we always end with Sadaq Allah al-Ali al-Azim. Thanks for watching. I love you. Ma'as salame. Bye.